Greatness is being able to, on earth, being able to manage, work through your own healing and issues, have compassion for yourself and others, take that as a wisdom journey, being in the mystery, in the wonder, and operating out of love.
Welcome to another installment of Behind Greatness. It's Luciano here speaking as your host as usual. I wanted to remind you, I always want to remind you, so this is just a habit, to please subscribe if you haven't already, share if you haven't already, and rate us on any podcast platform. We're on every major platform as well. Feel free to visit our website as well. You can see a little bit more detail on our past guests right from the beginning, from May 2020. We're talking to people all over the world, people of various backgrounds, and it's quite exciting. We're uncovering a lot about ourselves and a lot about the rest of the world here and beyond. And today's not going to be any different. So here we go. We're going to start with Marguerite. And before that, we'll give a quick background on her. Marguerite Rigoglioso, PhD, is the foremost authority on the history of virgin birth and the author of the bold new award-winning book, The Mystery Tradition of Miraculous Conception, Mary and the Lineage of Virgin Births. Marguerite taught many graduate and undergraduate courses in the US and the UK, and 10 years ago, 2012, founded her own Seven Sisters Mystery School, through which she's been teaching about the sacred feminine and mentoring clients on the evolutionary spiritual path. She is also the author of Virgin Mother, Goddess of Antiquity, and The Cult of Divine Birth in Ancient Greece. Welcome to the program, Marguerite.
Thank you so much. And it's only a fellow Italian who could pronounce my last name so beyond perfectly.
I practiced
what
all
a thrill.
morning.
Out of all the interviews I've done, that's really been the only one where this has happened.
Like, there is no doubt that last name is Italian. So yes, I had to practice.
Exactly.
What I understand is, though, you grew up in the Bronx.
I did. Well, not grew up, but I'd say I was born there and lived there until just before I went to kindergarten.
And where did you go after that?
Pelham, New York, which was a suburb of New York, in Westchester County.
Yeah.
Pelham is a town that is in the suburb of Westchester County. So, yeah.
So the Italian side of your family actually comes from like ancient parts.
Yeah. And all of my family is Italian. They are Southern Italian, or three of my grandparents came from Sicily. One came from Bari, on the heel of the boot.
Yes.
The top of the heel, that we were talking about earlier. Yes. So I am definitely a daughter of ancient Sicily, ancient Greece, ancient whatever crossroads, Africa that are there.
Sure.
And were there in Sicily going back, thousands of years, and southern Italy.
Yeah, when we say thousands of years, like we really mean this. Like, for people who are not aware of that part of the planet, it's places like southern Italy and Sicily were colonized by so many ancient cultures. In the recent, before the Romans. So I'd say in the recent ancient times, colonized by the Greeks.
Yes, that's pretty recent for them.
Yeah. Only 3,000 years. Which I can see as no coincidence to some of the stuff that you like to talk about. And that you like to teach.
Isn't it interesting? Yeah, because so much of my research is centered around what I call the ancient Mediterranean world. And so much of my scholarship has focused on there. My sacred pilgrimages and ceremonial work has focused there initially. Now it's really branched more out, not only globally, but galactically.
We're going to talk about this.
Yeah, but it's been quite a journey of ancestral DNA going back, and then dealing with what feel like my other past lives. I don't know if your audience subscribes to the notion of past lives, but I certainly do. And it goes, my past lives go into Africa, they go into the now United Kingdom, all over Europe, some of North America. Those are some of the key places where I've had lives, and I think I draw from streams of wisdom remembered from those in everything that I've been doing in this lifetime.
As a background for the listener who's just tuning in on this kind of subject material, and this is actually for you as well. We if you're interested, but it doesn't matter because I'm telling you anyway, so you have no choice. Antonia Mills, who's now in her early 80s, we had her, had her on the podcast, and she's a social scientist and a researcher, or was. She's retired in British Columbia, and she was one of the few researchers of the study of reincarnation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she was hired by Ian Stevenson in the 80s.
Wow.
And she studied Aboriginal tribes in British Columbia.
Oh, blessed be, of course. Wow.
Yeah, it's like
fascinating.
A fascinating conversation we have. So I am very open to it. And this is part of the reason why we wanted to have you on the show. So I first heard about you through an interview you gave to John Price on the Sacred Speaks.
Yes. Yes.
So I've mentioned his podcast a few times on this podcast. I love the subject material that he likes to explore. Well, let's go back to your lineage. You mentioned in one of your interviews that your grandfather was a shaman.
My great grandfather in Sicily was the town healer in Corleone.
No kidding, Corleone. Wow.
And I found that out through research that I was doing in Sicily on the Greek tradition, which focused on the goddesses Demeter and Persephone. So I was very fascinated with all of those sites, and the fact that there was veneration and honoring of those goddesses there in the Greek times. So I was doing hands-on, boots on the ground research in various parts of Sicily, and of course, connecting in with various family members, distant cousins and things like that. And yeah, I found this out in 2001, essentially, that this was the case, and that my grandmother, my father's mother, who was also from Corleone, as was my father's father, she had diabetes, so she had trouble keeping pregnancies, and she lost something like 8 or 9 pregnancies. And there are these various stories in the family, but one is that she prayed to Saint Anthony that if he would let her keep the baby, she would name it after him, either Anthony, Antonio, or Antonia. Another one is that she received packets of herbs from Sicily, from her husband's father, my great grandfather, and that is what helped stabilize her. So this would have been Bernardo, the town healer at the time. So it's really interesting that I essentially go back to a lineage of what I would call stregoneria in a positive way, meaning the strega is the witch, or the stregone is the witch, male witch. But these were really the people who carried the old knowledge of healing originally. And then, of course, they became demonized and so forth. Apparently, my great-grandfather there was a syncretized, healer. He was operating as a Christian, but he was really pulling through this ancient pre-Christian knowledge. And who knows who else in my lineage, what other women, who trained him, what other women and men. My grandfather had the ability to do hands-on healing as well. There's stories in the family about that. So it's, that brings me right to the mystical tradition in my lineage in this lifetime. And it's fascinating because when I went to the California Institute of Integral Studies, I got my master's and PhD there. My first paper that I wrote as a master's student was Stregoneria, the old religion in Italy.
Can you share that paper after
yes,
recording?
it's
Please.
I think I still have it on my sevensistersmysteryschool.com site under free resources. If you tap into the one that says free articles,
Okay.
you can sign in for that and get that for free. Stregoneria, the old religion of Italy. So I was clearly tuning in, right?
Yes, and a side note, streghe is actually the name of a particular herb liqueur in southern Italy as well. Even though you don't want to talk about the yellow one.
I'm aware of that.
Drink
Yeah,
it
of
cold.
course, but it has to come from the herbs.
Exactly.
These are the old ways, the old people, the old shamanism. So yes, it's not incorrect to say that my great grandfather was a shaman. If you want to use that terminology, which is contested by some people, but whatever. Also, I'll just say the town healer.
There are a few different directions I can go to. I'm going to choose one and then see if we can loop back to the other couple. So you mentioned California. I want to create a background for the listener too, and also for myself to fill in the blanks. You lived in California for 20 years. And then after your mom passed, you decided you became more curious about exploring where we go.
Right. Well, and that happened actually very early on when I was 10 years old.
Oh, okay.
After she passed, that was the big initiation into the great unknown, into the death mysteries, into the other world. And I didn't really know that was an initiation. It just was a shock, a horror, and a trauma for me as a 10-year-old. But fast forward into my 30s, and I began to understand that mother-daughter separation and that lost story is just the same story as Demeter and Persephone, the daughter who gets abducted into the underworld and separated from her mother. So that's why I was very, very fascinated with that story as a method of healing for myself and connecting with the sacred feminine that I had been ripped from, essentially. And then fast forward beyond that, I went I did a lot of studies about the sacred feminine goddesses and priestesses throughout history, throughout the world. And I decided to make that official in terms of my academic studies. So that's why I went to CIIS in the women's spirituality program, and then eventually got my PhD there as well.
And you said in 2012 that you were led to a resource that helped you. This is your quote, and I got really curious. You were led to a resource that helped you weave together everything you had done into your mystery school, or a mystery school.
Yes. So I started working with a coach and a sacred entrepreneurism coach, and she helped me. She had been a former academic, and now she was working as an entrepreneur to help others. And she helped me weave together the academic research and teaching I had done with my angle toward esoteric spirituality and my writing skills and my basic chutzpah into what quickly became, I received the name in the shower, Seven Sisters Mystery School. And that was an umbrella for all of my teachings that I had done, would do, and, will do on into the future, and an umbrella for the many types of offerings that I've been giving in addition to classes, such as ceremonies and one-on-one mentoring and of all different varieties. So, yeah.
Can I weave something else in here? Because you said in the shower, we had a green witch from California, actually, a Polish descent. Marisha, an episode in the 80s somewhere, Marisha Mrnowska. And I was quoting her to another podcast guest that we had, who's a medical doctor and a surgeon. And I've known him since we were 14. But he's a fascinating guy. And as a scientist and as a surgeon, he was very open in sharing with us that he gets ideas often in the shower.
Yeah.
So you say this, I know I do.
Yeah.
It can't just be that you're away from your desk or away from work.
No.
It's got to be connected to water.
It is. It's connected to water, the energies of water. And then what's happening is your auric field is being cleared.
Auric.
In addition, yeah, your energy body is being cleared in addition to your physical body when you're in the shower. Like literally, the field that extends beyond our body is being scoured. And also because of the action of the water, which is a sacred element, and sometimes the warmth and the fact that we go into more of a different brainwave state when that's happening, yes, you can receive lots of downpours in the shower
Go figure.
of special ideas.
So question,
Yeah.
what is a mystery school?
Well, it is a domain because it could be a physical place, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. And in my case, it's more like a realm that doesn't necessarily have a physical place, but it's where people tune in to the great unknowns and the dimensions beyond the third dimension, the senses beyond the five senses, to access knowing, teachings, and go through soul level initiations as a result of all of that contact. So there are many components and types of teachings that can come in either through physical teachers or through astral plane or, interdimensional teachers who are always there for us, delivering that information in the shower and in other types of situations, so that a lot of the teaching is direct awakenings, direct inner knowings, doors that are opened. Perhaps it might be that some piece of information triggered it, but the knowing is really ultimately an inner process. And this is why they referred to things in the ancient world, like the Eleusinian mysteries and, these different types of mysteries as mysteries. It was something that could not be spoken.
You mentioned interdimensional beings. Let's break this open, because John Price, the other
Yes.
from his podcast, asked really good questions, and sometimes I want to nudge him. Ask her this. So here's my nudge to John. Ask you. Let's break it open. You said you told him, and then not just him. This is in the other interviews I've listened to too. You said the underworld is alive and well, and that the gods are real.
Mm-hmm.
Let's elaborate. What does this mean?
Right.
Do you really mean this?
Yes, I do. Because there is far more than just what appears to us in this reality. And these realms can be accessed when your brain goes into a more open state or a different type of vibration. Sometimes that's brought about through deep states of breathing or deprivation of food or use of sacred plant medicines, things like that, right? Once you start opening to that frequency, and I think it would also be described as like certain chakras or the energy centers of the body that are located up and down the spine.
Can I tell you before you start recording that this has happened twice before?
Yeah.
Like recording has stopped. One of them was the power. And I was talking to Athena Laz, and we were talking about lucid dreaming.
Yeah.
And when we were talking about malevolent beings in our dreams, I asked her a question about these malevolent beings. Power cut out.
I know. It often happens in this, and I think you should leave this in the show, that we were just interrupted. The recording stopped mysteriously, and now we're resuming. It often happens that when spiritual vibrations or energies get high or start opening portals to the other dimensions, technology responds and glitches happen and so forth and so on. So
I'll mention that.
Yeah. So what we were talking about is talking about the chakras now, that in addition to the brainwave state opening or shifting, in order to access the other world or the underworld, it's thought that different energy centers of your body literally expand, like particularly your third eye, the eye in between your head, that portal, or your crown portal, things like that. So once you start entering into those domains with your consciousness, you suddenly have direct knowings. If you're using plant medicines, you might have direct seeings of these beings. You might literally, in your visual field, either eyes closed or eyes open, if you've taken enough, you'll literally see various beings appear. And so there's a whole other ecosystem of these beings in the interdimensional realms. We're in third dimension, let's say. There's fourth dimension, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, all the way up. And there are different beings that inhabit each of these dimensions. There are different races of beings. Sometimes they are connected with star systems in our understanding. And for us to sort of pinpoint them in space, so to speak. But these are really inner domains. And there's the domain of light and the Elysian fields and, the Eden realms. And then there's the domain of negativity, shadow, even pure evil. And the underworld itself is broken into two. It has a duality where some of the underworld is positive, loamy, the place like the womb where things gestate and go back for transformation after death. And then there's the part that literally is demonic. Okay, so we're dealing with all of these areas and domains, and what we have come to call the gods are really just interdimensional beings of varying abilities. The higher their abilities seem, the more godlike they seem to us, and the more we tend to want to worship them, venerate them, obey them, that type of thing. Right? So there's a whole history, and there are many, many people out there now that are talking about these domains and who these beings are, how they have interacted with Earth, how they are interacting with Earth, and, hopefully what Earthlings can do to shift some of this interactivity that's negative.
So in speaking to Carl Ruck as well on this podcast, he was very well known. I mean, you know him well, known in the 70s for coming up with research on, based on the understanding that the ancient Greeks and before were taking entheogens, were ingesting plant medicines to reach higher states of consciousness.
Yeah.
And he said Pythagoras, as an example, was one of those, and he saw the math. He didn't invent the math, he saw the math.
That's right.
So when you tell me this, as you're explaining it, there are interdimensional beings that we can see, we can communicate with. And then I want to ask you a direct question as well on that. Does it necessarily mean then that the myths, the hero legends that we learn from history are actually stories based from personal experience of people, our ancient brethren, who were in touch with those dimensions back then? Like they weren't made up stories or real stories?
Yes, they're histories in many cases. And sometimes they reveal distortions. Sometimes the histories themselves become distorted by various influences. Sometimes what happens in these stories is already a distortion of something that shouldn't have been happening. And sometimes, these are just telling us the history of what went down on the astral plane as it affected humans.
How do you communicate with the interdimensional beings? How are you navigating it?
Right.
And what do you do to navigate it, and how do you navigate it?
So my first connectivity with interdimensional beings was through synchronicities that would happen in my life. Those unexplainable and profound coincidences that you suddenly are upon you. I would have quite a few of those. And I realized in later years that this was the way that my inner soul was, connecting with my higher self, with the divine realms, in whatever mechanism this is, to alert me and give me messages and show me about the mystery and the wonder of the cosmos. And then from there, I had always an intuitive sense that there was something more. And so my pathway in was academia. I wanted to know deeply about these ancient Greek gods and goddesses. I wanted to know about the Roman situation, these ancient priestesses, and what were these mysteries all about. I deeply, deeply wanted to know. I did a lot of travels. I touched a lot of sacred spots. I did ceremony there by myself with other people. And then at CIIS, I met the man who became my partner for about 9 years. And he taught me how to use medicine. So I had a few ceremonies using psilocybin mushrooms. Mm-hmm. And that was a real mind opener. That when you're in a state like that, beyond the shadow of a doubt that there is an other world. There are intelligences. I was being contacted, I was being shown, and so forth. I had underworldly experiences that were quite harrowing.
I hate this. I hate the so forth. I want to know what so forth means.
The what?
The so forth. You said and so forth.
Oh, and so forth. Right. Okay. Well, we could definitely go into this topic, but I'll give you the history of my work in this regard, and then we can go back about specifics.
Go for it.
So I had experiences, including going into the underworld, and also oftentimes what will happen in these ceremonies is anything that's unhealed will come up. Trauma from this and other lifetimes, as well as the karma that you're facing, things that you set into motion in this and other lifetimes that were not positive, that now, oh boy, you've got to reckon with. You've got to somehow reconcile, make amends with, understand, and so forth. So I did a few of those sessions, and they were so intense and they got so increasingly underworldly and disturbing that I had to let it go for 7 years. And then at that point, I went back in through cannabis. I had an experience with some other women, and I didn't realize we were eating things. So I didn't really realize that how much I was eating and how much this was going to affect me. And boy, did it. And that was my re-entry back into the underworld. And I had this experience where I finally got home. Like, I was driving. I mean, it was just crazy. I finally got home, and, my partner at the time was there, and he was trying to run a bath for me. And I said, no, you know what? I'm not supposed to dissipate this. I'm supposed to go into it. And I had the knowing that Persephone was asking me if I wanted to go into the underworld. I told my partner this, and he said, oh, Persephone's asking you if you want to go into the underworld, huh? And I said yes. And then I felt like I knew I was just lying there, but I felt like I was going through portal of time and space at the speed of very high speed. It was so intense that I was like, whoa, slow it down. And that was my entry back into these dimensions and domains in which I would receive direct information. I could ask questions and receive information. And that began my engagement with cannabis over quite a number of years, only ceremonially. I never, ever smoked it recreationally. I don't even know if I could, because it would affect me so deeply. One puff and I was like already in the other domains. And so I took it seriously as a plant of opening, and it was more gentle for me than the mushrooms, because wow, I don't want to be going into the underworld continually in that way. I just wasn't ready for it. So for many years I used the cannabis, and during that time I also went to a school of psychic training, and so I began to learn how to open my consciousness without medicine. And I was able to sync this sensation up with a memory of the sensation of how open I'd be when I was in medicine. And I was able to go, chunk, and kind of train my body into opening, right? So I can open at will, essentially. or I can open through medicines. And then I kind of left cannabis for about 2.5 years during the last 2.5 years, because I was just given the message that it was too dangerous for me to be working on the astral plane with all the shenanigans that were going on of this time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I began to work more with cacao. And the point of that was that cannabis for me and mushrooms, open up my higher consciousness, third eye, crown, and all. Cacao opens your heart. And so I've been on this soul journey that not only was about getting cosmic information and then not having any of your own spiritual growth about it, but it was about moving into the heart. And that is the premier invitation and opportunity for humanity right now, is to move into our heart, to really open that heart chakra, if you will, and integrate the love energy and the love vibration with wisdom and knowing. And that's what a lot of us are about. That's certainly what I'm attempting.
So I understand the importance of those keywords, loving, love and wisdom. I think I get it. Maybe not fully, but I am getting it. And I understand that those are messages you might be receiving or even looking for when you are interplaying with these other dimensions.
Yeah.
But what facts, what truths, what answers are you getting when you are communicating beyond 3D?
I mean, I always go in with like a long list of questions. And I have gotten so many knowings over the years, so much information that is essentially woven into the many courses that I've offered through Seven Sisters Mystery School. It's woven into my understanding about divine birth, because that coding came to me when I was, in my brother's apartment, and I was studying about Demeter and Persephone in Sicily. And I was reading a book about it, and all of a sudden I just had that altered open state experience where a whole downpour came in. Virgin birth is real. Women were doing this. And I was like, oh my God. And so, my intellect and my intuition have been working in harmony all this time. And so for a lot of my research, it's like I will read about various pieces of information, and then I'll go into an open state of consciousness, and then I'll receive tons of information about it. Or I'll be in an open state of consciousness. I'll be starting to get these downpours, and then I have to go and look and find the validation, in books and things like that. So that's like the general picture. But the whole knowing about the divine birth was a real practice and is a real practice of specialized women, essentially has been something that's come through the ethers to me directly. And I was not even using medicine when that first insight came. There have been other times where I have used medicine and I've gotten more information about it, but I've gotten information about the nature of reality, what's going on the planet, what beings are negatively impacting humanity, how and why and where, my own karmic involvement with these beings in different lives and so forth. And, I've written blogs about this information. I've done audios about this information, again, woven it into my academic work and my teaching and so forth. So that's kind of the overview story.
Yeah, I've listened to some of that. So I've tried to synthesize my questions to the limited amount of time that we have together. So there's a lot you've said. The virgin birth, divine birth, the human divine. Let's delve in a little bit, and I'll start with this question. Maybe it's not a question, I don't know, but I didn't know this word, and then I looked it up. You've mentioned this a couple of times. In the previous interview that we talked about, parthenogenesis.
Parthenogenesis, yes.
Do you practice in your mystery school the rites of divine birth and parthenogenesis?
What I practice, what I offer are tools and techniques that I've learned from, for example, the Holy Womb Chakra system that has come through India and Sri Kaleshwar, women and men, to clear their wombs or their area, they're not a bindu point, so that they can release a lot of the programming and heartache and pain and everything that's been inserted into our wombs and become clearer vessels. And then those who wish to conceive can conceive divine level children. So there is a whole practice that I teach, which I call the Holy Womb Chakra teachings, that people can take, anyone can take it, men, women, to do that purification in preparation for not, for those who want to conceive some kind of higher level being, or just to be able to interact in the world as a sacred person, bringing healing, medicine, knowing, and so forth. Okay, so that's an example of tools and techniques that approach the area of divine birth. I just did a weekend workshop online with Z Earth Star and Indigo Angel, where we each worked on aspects of women clearing their bodies from various implants and tags, especially in their reproductive system, that will liberate them from some negative influences and that have been disempowering to them. And that course is available with all of the journeys and tools that we used there. So all of these are ways that things that we need to do as like first, second, and third layers of getting back into the ability to do divine birth on the planet with integrity, with safety, with wisdom, okay? Because this divine birth has also been used negatively to give birth to beings that are not so positive. So I offer knowledge. I offer knowledge and I offer some tools, but it's not like, hey, take this workshop and, you're going to give birth to Jesus again, right? Not yet. We're still up to it.
Not yet. I don't want to forget to go back to the virgin birth, but before that, because you mentioned this earlier, and I had made a note, and now you've touched upon it again. And you've also, I've also listened to you talk about this in other discussions. Who or what are the malevolent beings who are interfering with humanity, that have been interfering, and what is their purpose?
Right. Well, they go by various names, and their history has been largely veiled to us, except unless you look at the Greek myths. For example, Zeus. Okay. Or if you look at, other stories in Mesopotamia, those myths, it's all encoded in there. Marduk, Enlil, those beings. Those are names that are more familiar to us. And then there are other names. Those stories of all of this astral warfare and destruction of the feminine and destruction of the priestesshoods and so forth and so on are kind of a tip of the iceberg of Earth histories that have actually happened, that have been lost to us or relegated to the realm of myth and therefore non-reality, like Atlantis, the myth of Atlantis, like the myth of Lemuria, so forth. But people who are oracles, which I consider myself one, are retrieving that information from the records of time and saying, hey, here's actually what happened. And we're piecing together a new understanding of our Earth history and histories and who has been operating here on this planet. And some of these beings are named gods in major religions. And, so it's like, we are in a process of evaluating and reevaluating everything. Who are these beings? What are they doing? And who else is under the hood?
What are they trying to do? What's their MO?
Negative beings live on negative energy. So they try to create as much chaos, negative emotion, trauma, blood loss, and so forth on the planet, all of which they feed on. So all of our wars are governed ultimately by these beings who
Manifesting themselves through us?
Yes, they manifest through humans, some of whom know what's going on and most of whom do not. We're basically programmed and do the bidding of these beings and call it making a living.
So we're hybridized, unconsciously hybridized by beings.
Yeah, we are. What our oracles are showing us is that we are literally hybridized, that our DNA has literally been tampered with, tinkered with, and spliced with beings' DNA from, various dimensions and astral federations, some of which are positive and some of which are negative. And so we are already susceptible to some of these negative influences. And then you have, the good old-fashioned entities that are floating around looking to attach to people, which they do in cases of any type of addiction, which they do in cases of sexual trauma, sexual abuse, rape, and so forth, which they do in cases of, murder. And they're feasting, and they will jump from generation to generation, person to person. Yeah. So this is a big awareness that we're having to come to so that we can understand, not be stuck with it, but how to clear this out. It's scary to hear about it at the beginning, but it's like, well, doesn't that explain your life better than anything you have ever come up with or anyone else has, And so what do we do about it is the point. Not that we are victims of this perpetual activity, but we are getting wise. We are getting to see, and we are getting to act. That's what's happening now on planet Earth.
You use the word wise. My question, because I wanted to interrupt you with that exactly. It's hard work to want to be and to gather wisdom, but it means a lot of self-awareness and the understanding that your ego can get in the way of learning these two things, and learning to lead. So I'm going to say learning to lead with love, so being open, and learning to understand that you know nothing, but it's okay. it's okay to know nothing, because it means that you can ask and you feel less embarrassed about asking different kind of questions. Like 5 years ago, there's no way I would have wanted to talk to somebody with your experience. There's no way. I would have been really, really judgy about it. Mm-hmm. Not so now. Like I'm very, very curious about what you're telling me. And it doesn't matter whether I agree with it or not. I want to understand it. Right. You mentioned, and you have been talking about how Mary, the Virgin Mother of Jesus, for those of us that are Christian and grow up learning this, came from a long lineage of shamans, of priestesses, who understood the virgin birth. Yeah. And that's been suppressed by many reasons that you've been over, of course, in your discussions, and you feel free to go over it now as well. But there is something that you said that I really want to go over. And you said, scholars don't want us to know the evidence of sexuality in the ancient world. Mm-hmm. And that is linked to a lot of the work that you've done on the scholastic side, and a lot of the work that you do on the spiritual side. Right. Could you elaborate on that? Yeah, well, a lot of times, when I was operating more in the academic world, and I would be reading things about these ancient mysteries that clearly had sexual activity as a part of them, the scholars would never go into it. They would explain it away or think it was something else, or just not even see it.
They'd not even be able to see it. So there's been a clampdown on understanding how sexuality has figured into spirituality, spiritual ceremony, and so forth over hundreds, if not thousands of years. And I think that's partly the programming in academia and the fact that, people in academia, by and large, have not done mushroom journeys that would help them to have an opening to understand what it is that they're looking at when they're looking at mysteries of science or mysteries of mythology or mysteries of history and mysteries of whatever, medicine. So, what in various of these rituals that I've looked at academically, you see things like symbolic representations of the phallus and the vulva. And I've talked about in the Eleusinian mysteries that I believe that these were used by the initiates in their rituals into the other world, into the underworld, and so forth. And with virgin birth, anything that has to do with sexual energy, the power of sexual energy is stripped, right? So Mother Mary just la 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 had a conception, but what went into it? I mean, we're talking about the womb. We're talking about the organ and the chakra of desire. We're talking about certain energies have to get stimulated for a conception to happen. Those are sexual energies. So all of this tends to go missing in any strictly academic, scholarly explorations of these topics.
Until folks like Carl Rock.
Yeah, and I mean, even Carl, I think I tried to solicit an endorsement for my book, Virgin Mother Goddesses of Antiquity, half of which is devoted to the Eleusinian mysteries. Mm-hmm. And what I carefully construct happened there, that it went even beyond what I think he could manage.
Wow.
And he did not give me an endorsement, So it's like I'm beyond the beyond when it comes to some of this stuff. But people can read that book because it's very, very academic. It has all of the sources listed and come to your own conclusions.
I think that's also what's key. Coming to your own conclusions is very, very important because it allows us not to be strapped to anybody else's ideas.
Yeah,
and that's the reason why we're doing this podcast. We don't want to strap ourselves to ideas, and we don't want our listeners to, but we want to be able to explore the horizon beyond the river's edge. We might get a fellow named Amon Hillman on the.
Yes,
on the
I know David. Yeah, David Amon Hillman. He's got quite the past life pedigree himself.
Wow. Shocking the first time I heard him speak, but so...
He gets it.
Yeah. Well, and he's a guy who, he went straight to the ancient Greek text. He what I understood, said he wanted to learn ancient Greek in order to understand those texts that he found in...
Yeah, because half the time the translations are incorrect, misleading, milquetoast, missed the actual meaning of that word that would have been more appropriate, So
there is a man named Mauro Bellino. Have you heard of him?
No.
He's now starting to do some shows in English. His English is very bad, but he was, I shouldn't say bad. I mean, I'm making judgment. His English is not as strong as his Italian.
Yeah.
But he was a scholar, and he would translate many texts for decades for the Vatican.
Oh,
yes. And he, after I don't know how many years, he decided, I'm not doing this anymore. I have to let the public know what I'm reading and what I'm being told to translate and what's being mistranslated, undertranslated, or ignored in original text.
Oh my God.
Incredible. And a lot of it overlaps with some of what we've discussed here today. Love to have him on the podcast.
Il Vaticano, let's not even go there. But what I would direct people to look at is the work of Lisa Renee on her site Energetic Synthesis. I would direct people to look at the work of Indigo Angel who has a YouTube channel where she talks a lot about this. And it is hair-raising and mind-blowing what they're talking about as oracles.
One last note on oracles. I need to say this. I need to publicly say this. I don't know why. When I was a kid, I loved ancient history. And every time I read the word oracle, every time it came up in a test or in a quiz or in a discussion, I was convinced that an oracle was a place that soldiers went to or generals went to, never a person.
Because it is. It's a place, it's a person, and it's an energy. So you can have, like, the Oracle of Delphi is like a place, a portal where the information could come in more easily to the women who were considered oracles.
That's what we're not learning.
And then in the Tibetan tradition, the oracle, the state oracle is considered the residing place for the oracle to come in. So he, and there are women too, he is the location of it, and then he becomes possessed by the oracle, which is an interdimensional knowledge being who's coming in and then advising the Dalai Lama. Most people don't know that.
Well, we learn a lot of milquetoast versions.
This is what's been going on. Everything has been dumbed down. Everything has been redirected. Everything has been hidden. And it's popping up like plants on asphalt now. It's not going to be stopped.
I know that we have a very little time left here. Maybe, if we're open, we can have a longer conversation later on as well.
Yeah.
A couple of questions, just two more quick ones. Quick. I don't know if they're quick, but they're quick for me.
Okay.
Where are you going to exist once your body dies?
Let me tune into that for a second, Luciano. I think that my soul will have a few things that happen with it, which I think happen to most people. One is that part of your soul goes back to your original soul monad or soul pod, of which you are part, which is more like a group consciousness, and that you're connected directly to source, right? Part of it stays on the earth plane hovering as long as there are people who remember you and you're in communication. And part of you can go into a reincarnation, either in this life on earth or in another dimension. So a tripartite thing. And I think, though, that there's a transitional period that before you go anywhere, really, your soul is bouncing around in a way that it does in dream time. And that's why I think lucid dreaming is important to grasp and get a handle on, where you awaken within the dream so that you're not just buffeted about by these beings or your thought forms or whatever. So I may, it would be nice if I could, when I leave my body, I'm not like, wow, random at the behest and power of my unresolved issues bouncing around. I hope that I don't have to go through a heck of a lot of that, which is a kind of a purgatory or hell realm type thing. Okay. I hope that I can just cleanly move. And that's why some of these teachings, like what Mary Magdalene received in her Gospel of Mary, Jesus tells you how to ascend at every rung of the underworld when you're faced and when you leave your body, and you're going to have these voices that come in. So I hope that I remember all the codes and that I go to the brightest light so that I can continue on, without being feasted on. That's what I'd like.
Well, maybe the codes are in these types of conversations.
They are.
There's an openness.
Yeah, and they're in the emotional, psychological work that you do to release trauma release
Hmm.
tags, release entities, so that your mind is calmer when you go out.
Is there this? So I guess this is a 1B question. The three parts that you think you might exist in simultaneously. Is there a way? Do you think that you would find it possible to bring those three parts together and not be divided anymore?
Yeah, that's a very beautiful question. I think that in some senses you already are united. It's just, it seems like you're separated because there's the way we think of it, but it is all simultaneous. And or it could be that I or anyone decides not to reincarnate on the earth.
Hmm.
Some people, some beings get complete with reincarnating anywhere, and then they go kind of quasar, into the oneness.
Last question.
Mm.
What is greatness to you?
Greatness is being able to, on earth, being able to manage, work through your own healing and issues, have compassion for yourself and others, take that as a wisdom journey. Being in the mystery, in the wonder, and operating out of love.
Being in the wonder.
And with that, I really will have to go because now I'm going to offer my monthly Mother Mary Love and Empowerment Circle, where we have a monthly oasis where we work with this great master for various aspects of our healing. And I hope people will visit me at sevensistersmysteryschool.com. And if you're interested, there are many free resources. There are classes that you can take. You can work with me one-on-one and so forth.
And we'll put that in the show notes as well. We'll put all the details. Marguerite, thank you so much.
Thank you, Luciano. Really appreciate being here, and blessings to your audience, anyone listening.
Hey, it's Enrico Colantoni here, actor, director, and dedicated napper. Like what you heard today? There's more to come. Make sure to subscribe to Behind Greatness and learn about our live events at inspirenorth.com. You'll also find links to our social media right on our website, so be sure to give us a like and follow. Until next time, stay inspired.